All right, so I'm here with Dr. John Murphy with Ag Explore today. And John, I read a white paper on calcium. Man, let's just open this up. Tell me more about this. I mean, I'm thinking overall it's quality, but this was about apples. You wrote this. What's up?
Yeah, definitely. So the idea behind this paper was simply to put published research behind what our recommendations are, right? We go out, we do lots of grower meetings, but we want people to understand, man, there's a lot of science behind what we're recommending. And specifically when we get to these specialty crops, one thing I've really learned is, man, you get to a specialty crop, it's nothing for them to make 10 passes a year on that. When we're thinking corn and soybeans, we might get 2 or 3. But when we think calcium and we think these specialty crops, it's all about quality. And so I think about it, man, when you go to the grocery store and you walk in or your wife walks in and you're buying apples, what would pull you to those apples, right? What are you guys looking for?
I like the crisp ones. I mean, that's what I like.
Yeah, you like the crisp ones. You like the ones that are nice and clean on the outside that still have that nice taste, right? We call it shelf life.
Okay.
And that's what calcium is really about when we're thinking these apples and a lot of these specialty crops. It's about keeping the outside of the apple nice and clean, right? There's a disease called bitter pit when we think about apples, and it literally just gives you brown spots around it, and it softens it, and it takes that crispness away. So when you guys are at the store, that's not something you would go for.
So why does calcium matter?
Yeah. Yep. So calcium is a key component in cell walls. When we think about
so plants. Structure, we're talking about plant structure.
Yep, it's all about that structure. And so what we're thinking about is how do we keep the structure looking good, but then how do we keep it tasting good, and how do we give it shelf life? Because a lot of our fruits and vegetables are getting picked, they're getting put on a truck, it might have refrigeration, they're getting hauled, we're unloading it, but then how do we keep that looking good when the consumer comes in?
Okay, so we know calcium's important.
Yep.
And it's all about the cell structure and the walls. So we're building the plants.
Yep.
So we're finding ways to build better plants. If we're building better plants, there's a lot of timing to this.
There is.
Is it like in the soil beforehand? Is it foliar? Like when should we do this?
Yep. So specific to calcium acetate, when we're thinking apples, we're the idea that we're after bloom. Right. So we think about those beautiful blooms that we see on our apple trees. So we've gotten through that point, and it's a foliar application. So one thing I've learned about these specialty crops is we're getting multiple applications, and we're really spoon feeding, right? We're giving a little bit, and then we're giving a little bit more because we're trying to maximize that efficiency and make sure it has the calcium when it needs it, right? With apples and things like that, if we're looking at that large fruit, once we miss that window or we have that disease, there's really no going back and trying to salvage it.
So we're talking apples in this white paper.
Yep.
And so let's back up for a second. White papers are a study.
Yes.
Okay. So somebody did a study on this. Have we ever tried this? Is this a trial as well? And do you have like results from it?
Yes. Yep. So the idea behind it is there's 4 or 5 published research papers that we built our trial around.
Okay.
And then we built our protocols around. And so specifically in that one, we looked at bitter pit because that's a huge issue we saw. And using that calcium acetate reduced that bitter pit around 15%, right? Depending on which trial it was. But that's huge when we're thinking specialty crops.
And so when we talk specialty crops, arguably in the Midwest, we talk corn and beans a lot. But this is not just apples. This could be like canola, might be specialty, sunflowers, probably specialty. What about like tomatoes? Like if you want to make like goulash, I want a softer tomato.
Yep.
I don't want maybe the cell wall structure. Is that less calcium then?
No. So it's just about where the plant's going to put it. So when we think about an apple, they're built for firmness, for crispness, right? For the majority. And so when we're thinking those others, when we think vegetables, we still utilize it, right? We have some huge growers over in that Kentucky, Illinois, even down into Florida, but it's about still enhancing it because when you think about that tomato, you still want it nice and clean on the outside. You want that beautiful color.
Okay.
And so it's about that quality. And I love that you brought it up because when we think quality, it can go beyond that specialty crop, right? It can go to what you were talking about, canola, sunflower, wheat. We just measure the idea behind that slightly different. We talk about protein. We talk about oil.
I got you. Okay, so calcium is important. We got that. We know it helps the plant cell structure wise. We kind of know when to put it on. Okay. What else are we missing here? So you guys have done a study and you wrote a white paper on this study. So of the papers that you read that people had published stuff on it, what were the findings? You said 15% one time, but is it better than that?
It can be. So you can see that. What I like to do when we did this is I think there are 4 different studies. I actually talked to an apple agronomist out on the East Coast to get their own personal opinion on it. And so we saw that idea that, yes, but that's kind of our average that we're looking at across the board.
Okay, gotcha. So with these studies, you took it and then you applied it, like application, and did your own study with this with AgX, correct?
So parts of it we have. So the majority of the white paper is what other people have done.
Okay.
Because we call it third party research or CROs, and everybody wants to say, okay, it's great that it worked for you, but really, what does the science say? So that's really the take home behind that is what does the science say to it?
Okay. Any education we do it to try to make something better for the future.
Yep.
So now we've learned something. Calcium's important. What did we do to make it better?
Yes. So we put it as a calcium acetate, right? So let's tie it to potassium acetate. A lot of people know about potassium acetate.
Okay.
So calcium acetate, the acetate is literally a sugar type molecule, and it's native, or it's actually formed within the plant. And so when we think about applying an acetate, it's a really small molecule. The plant already identifies it, and so it enhances the uptake. Just like with a potassium acetate, it's 4.5 times more efficient than any other type of potassium. And so we put that calcium with a source that enhances the uptake and that utilization.
Gotcha. So we got steroids for plants.
Yep, definitely.
Not necessarily steroids, but acetate. It makes it better, makes it stronger all around. Okay. So AgX has a product for this. It's intake, correct?
So intake helps us pull that nutrient in.
Okay.
Right. So that's a way that we mobilize it. So I love it that you brought that up, because it's one thing to get it in. It's another thing to get it moved where it needs to be.
Oh.
And so our intake is what we like to call a technology, which can be a scary word, right? But it's simply, it's science based, but it shows that it enhances the movement, because we can get the calcium to the leaf. We can get it in the leaf, but if I don't get it to the apple, it doesn't do me any good.
And so when you're saying leaf, this intake is a foliar application that helps the plant get it to the right spot.
Yep, it is. And so we mix it with the product. And by putting it with the product, it enhances everything else that we're doing with it.
Perfect. Well, I think we just learned a whole lot in a short amount of time about a white paper. What else? Anything else?
Yeah, so I just really like tie it back. Quality matters on every crop.
Yeah.
And I mean, one thing I've learned as I've traveled is quality matters on wheat because it's about protein. Quality matters on canola when we're thinking about oil content. Honestly, quality matters on our soybeans because when we think about what's found in a soybean, it's a lot of protein. And so quality matters. It just depends on what are you using to build that quality.
Gotcha. Well, hey, listeners, if you want more, Dr. John Murphy with AgX, and make sure to click the link to go to the white paper.
Hey, well, welcome back to the last edition of the From the Field for 2026, where we get a chance to kind of talk about, man, what has all happened to get us to this point, and what does it look like to finish out 26 and maybe even plan a little bit for 27. Today, I'm joined by my good friend and fellow agronomist, Ben Westendorf up in Iowa. And Ben, I hate to have corn envy, but your corn is looking pretty good up there.
Well, John, I hate to be this person, but this camera is strategically angled so you don't see where I didn't get into some of the hog manure, and that doesn't look so great along the end road here. But by and large, yeah, things are looking really good.
Man, that's great to hear. I know we had a chance to be up at some plot days up there in Iowa. I guess that was just last week. Time gets going fast. But I mean, crops are looking good all the way up I-35. We had a chance to kind of drive around the countryside a little bit. Talk to me a little bit. What's this year look like for you guys?
Overall, John, we've got dealt a pretty fair hand. Crops went into good conditions. I was slightly on edge. I did have to make the decision to back down just slightly on my dry fertilizer program, just kind of set a budget and stick to it. So I was a little nervous with how that was looking, how that was going to look, but things look phenomenal. The corn, the soybeans went into really good soil. We got a good chance to get in there, put a herbicide pass down. Not a lot of weed pressure for the most part we're seeing, so that's a really good thing. Now here we are, middle of July here. We're dropping pollen onto our silks, and things look like they just have an incredible amount of potential. I will say, if I have to gripe about something, you know me, I like to throw something in there to complain about. If you ask some of my coworkers, maybe just a little bit too much rain at times. I know, like, if you get south of Ames, Iowa, down into the Slater, Huxley, Polk City area, man, it was just 2, 3 weeks ago. They got hammered with like 10 inches of rain in the shot of like a day and a half. So prayers go out to those guys down there. That's no good for their crops.
It's kind of been similar down here. We've had the best corn crop and bean crop, honestly, we've had in a few years. And in my area in southern Missouri, we're not really battling drought, but we've had a couple of those really big rainfall events. But it almost kind of seems like that's been the story, right? Just these massive rainfall events, 10 inches coming out of individual storms. But there's also some pockets that are a little bit drier. I know some of our guys that we work with up in the northern plains. They're on like 4 inches of precip right throughout this growing season. So definitely some variability. But honestly, Ben, as you and I get a chance to talk, that almost makes it interesting, right? We get a chance to cover such a large geography that we get to see everything from Florida all the way to Montana and see things that are working in between.
Yeah, John, like you said, last week and the week before that, we got our group of incredible sales reps together, and I just had by a show of hands who thinks you have the best year, the best crop potential you've seen. Maybe setting for a record year. And when we were in Indiana, I would say it was limited hands being raised, but there was a one or two from kind of that eastern seaboard area that did throw their hand up. They thought they had a good opportunity. But even more so last week when we were here in Iowa, our southern Minnesota, kind of that northwest, moving through the northeast down to central Iowa, maybe kind of stopping at that Highway 30 there in Ames and going north. Really good opportunity for some great corn through there and soybeans as well, but it's kind of early to determine those soybeans, as many of you know.
Most definitely, right? That and wheat too. The hardest thing is to try to predict what kind of crop you're going to have. But Ben, as we're kind of thinking potential, right? And as we're saying, man, what do we have left for 26? A lot of the corn from kind of my area south. We've already come out. We've already got our fungicide on. Quite frankly, we had very, very low disease pressure. I know as we've kind of walked some fields, we've had a little bit of insect pressure, a little bit of silk clipping, but really things have lined up really good for us this year. And I know we took care of those fungicides, those insecticides, and we also did a lot of tissue tests and also in-season testing as well. Tried to kind of take care of some of those micronutrients. Where you are, there's still quite a bit of that left to go, right? When we were up there, and like you said, you're right at pollination or maybe just shy of pollination. What are some of the things you're seeing? Are you seeing much disease, much insect pressure?
We had a really great agronomist that I follow on the Twitter or the X, whatever you want to call it, and she kind of sounded the alarm early of some bacterial leaf streak that was showing up really heavily here through central Iowa. So I hit our fields. It's out there. Far as I understand, it's just kind of a thing, just a little bit of an unfortunate thing. I don't think it's going to be near the yield drag, such as like a tar spot or a northern corn leaf blight or southern rust like we saw last year. But nonetheless, we're going to continue forward like we got disease pressure for curative and preventative with our fungicide application. In fact, on the way up here, John, this morning, I saw the first air tractor buzzing through the air, dive bombing us. So it's going to be no time at all before it looks like a war zone out here with yellow planes dropping fungicide and dropping insecticide, which is kind of an interesting concept because, right, I'm not seeing a whole lot of insecticide out here or insect pressure, yet we're still going to put insecticide out here because it makes sense to go in the tank, right?
Definitely. And I think you brought up a key point right there, right? Things that make sense to go in the tank. So, kind of where I am, we've already gone through those steps, and it's all about that plant health, right? Like you said, not a lot of disease pressure, but whether we're talking kind of the stay green, or we're talking stress mitigation, or we're talking this idea of how do we keep nutrients and water moving through the plant, that's kind of where we have been. And it kind of is that point that you're at as well. So, when you think about those other things, like you said, an insecticide going with that fungicide. Ben, what are some other things that you've been seeing on tissue tests on your own farm as you've traveled that really have a place in that tank?
Yeah. So before we talk about that, I want to talk about one thing that we did do that I've seen pay huge dividends, and that is using a planter box treatment. Specifically, it has a biological in there, a mycorrhizal fungi, and that's so important because when we talk getting hot and dry here in August that we're going to start moving into, it's an awesome opportunity for that mycorrhizal fungi to go to work and keep bringing water into that plant. And when we talk that tip back on the tip of that corn plant, that is 99% of the time, what I'll see that mycorrhizal fungi do is prevent some of that tip back or lessen the tip back. So that's one thing that's already been done. Can't go back and redo that. That's something we've done. But looking forward, something we could pair with that fungicide in the tank, when we look at tissue tests and all these university research studies, boron, most of the time there is not nearly enough boron in the soil nor in the plant with the tissue test. And to get some foliarly applied boron, that's one of those nutrients that you actually can probably get all your boron needs with the foliar application. And economically wise, we're not talking a lot of money. So when we're pairing it with a fungicide and insecticide, man, if we get a boron out there to help with some late season nutrient mobilization from the source or the leaves to the sink or the cob of corn, man, we're going to see fantastic results on some yield monitors this fall.
Man, I love that. Right, we get a chance to look at a lot of tissue tests. We have some instrumentation that lets us take almost live tissue tests, and just state after state, region after region, location after location, boron is one of those nutrients we continue to see on that low side. And you brought up that key point, right? The why. Why does our plant need it late? And it's about that nutrient mobility. And it's fairly easy, right? We're already making that pass, and it doesn't take very much. And I love that you kind of brought that up, because sometimes it's that low hanging fruit, let's be honest, right, that can give us some of the best ROI. So I love that, right? Kind of talking boron. You know, another thing that we've kind of seen with some micronutrient deficiencies, man, as we've traveled, is also zinc. And zinc is one of those interesting things because we always talk about it early. I am guilty of that, right? We always say, man, we need that zinc early, auxin formation, root growth, right, and shoot development. But as we've really kind of dug into some of these tissue tests and those demand curves, we've seen that we have a pretty good demand for zinc late season. And when we think about how do our crops get it up, you already brought up the point. It gets hot and it gets dry. So it gets hard to pull those nutrients up out of the soil. So one of the things we've seen, actually not too far from you in some areas down in the south in Tennessee, is putting on some zinc at that late season fungicide pass. So Ben, kind of talk to me, where does that fit in your program?
Yeah, so I am able to get some zinc put down in the ground for my crop to find. But looking at that, that probably isn't the best place for it, right? So we can talk about that demand curve like you brought up, John, with the 9% zinc EDTA at that VTR1 timing. We're not talking a whole lot of product nor dollars, right? We can talk about anywhere from 12 to 16 ounces and get the right amount of zinc needed at that time to have a fantastic response. And when it comes to the pocketbook, boy, we're talking just as economical as a good insecticide to go in there in that tank with the fungicide.
I love what you brought up there, and I think we have to hammer on that more just as ourselves. A lot of times we think, man, if we want to move a needle, we have to put a lot on. But so far, we've talked about 2 micros where we're not talking large amounts, but we're putting on at that specific timing, right? The why does it need it? Because that late season zinc, right, helps to metabolize the carbohydrates into that kernel. So for where I am, right, we're harvesting that nutrients, all that sugar that's coming out of the leaf and packing into that kernel, and the zinc is a key component of it. But again, like you said, we got to be careful of the form that we use, right? We want to make sure it's protected, doesn't tie things up in the tank, but it doesn't have to be flashy, and luckily for me, it doesn't have to be expensive, right? We can place some well-earned dollars at that very specific spot.
I know when you brought this up to me last year of trying it up here, as you started your statement with, I said to you, well, that's not really where it goes. You know, it goes in furrow. That's an in furrow product. And we've walked through the logistics of it with our sales rep and their customer, of how it could need it still. Man, the results were fantastic. Almost scary to talk about with the dollar spent. So I encourage you, those listening, to give it a try. Go source a nice zinc 9% EDTA. Throw, if you're going on fungicide timing, somewhere around that 12, 14 ounces or so, maybe 16 if you want to run it a little higher, and just see the results for yourself.
I love it, right? And again, like you said, 2 things that have a place on all of our crops, and they generate ROI. The last thing that I want us to talk about is we're thinking what is left for 26, right, in this current crop year, is going back to that stress mitigation. I think you brought up a key point, right? We're putting the fungicide out, even though maybe we're not seeing a lot of disease pressure yet. I know you guys got hammered by southern rust last year, so we know the importance, but there's secondary benefits, especially when we think kind of about those strobe fungicides, where early on when they came out, even when we didn't have disease pressure, we still saw plant health benefits to it that stay green. So Ben, when you kind of think about stress mitigation in your mind, I mean, what's the benefit of mitigating that late season stress?
The benefit is everything, right? There was a study that shows
I love it.
75% of our yield can be lost, or yield potential can be lost from late season stress. And I was in a farm show this winter, setting up at the booth up in Wisconsin, and a large crop input manufacturer was set up nearby, and I went over to visit with them about their fungicide, one that I purchased myself, just about, what can I expect from this new fungicide, how is it going to perform, some benefits they've seen, so on and so forth. And they said one of the best things you could also do is pair it with some sort of a nutritional or an additive that totes the benefits of stay green or crop health, which is kind of ironic because they also manufacture those products but hardly ever talk about them. So I thought that was a great opportunity for me to turn my look onto Ag Explorer's product and start looking at a stress mitigation type product late season. Specifically, we have one that has 3 in it, but what we're looking to get out of that is really that GABA piece. And I'll let you kind of talk about a couple of the other benefits of the mixes that are in the tank or the formulation, but that GABA is going to be crucial to drop that ethylene production in this plant late season, so we prevent some of that pod and kernel abortion.
Man, I like what you brought up, right? We were talking through that study that I think it was last week, and we spend all of this money, let's be honest, right? Hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of dollars to get the crop to this point. And then those small things that are left, right, that can help mitigate the stress. And really, in my view, that's where we capture the value, right? A small investment with a fungicide, it really helps us to capture the value. And you brought up the Aaron Judge, right? That the GABA for that stress mitigation. But we also have choline chloride. And choline chloride is all about slowing down chlorophyll breakdown. And so when we think about what does that mean, that's that grain fill duration, right? How do I pack more into that kernel? How do I capture more energy with my soybean to put in that pod? And that's really that key portion of it, along with the GABA. And then the last one is that kinetin, right? And we can boil kinetin late season down to kind of 2 things. We always think about it with reproductive success, but it also helps with nutrient mobility, which is everything that this plant's doing. You brought up that key phrase, source to sink. Everything about a corn plant right now is how am I moving it from the leaf down to that ear so that I can capture the value of my genetics that I put in. And I think that's a great spot, right? When we think late season, we think what is left to do. That's what's left to do. It's about capturing the value of what you've already put into the crop with small investments late season. What are your thoughts kind of as you think about those air tractors they're getting ready to pass over? And I mean, I think it's capturing that value.
Absolutely. And I just wanted to toss one more thing in there as we're talking about that late season three-way PGR. We have a I know you would agree with this. We have a fantastic group of sales agronomists here at Ag Explorer, and they challenged us with this question last week of when we talk about using something like this, we talk about stay green. Are we going to make a plant perform? Say I plant a lot of 105 to 112 day here in central Iowa corn hybrids. Are we going to let's just take one of them? Are we going to make a 108-day hybrid perform like 115? And the answer is no, not necessarily. We are, however, going to make that 108-day perform all the way through its 108-day season to make sure that that plant is green leaf, taking as much nutrient and sunlight as possible to pack that test weight onto that kernel.
I think you hit it right on the head right there, right? And it boils down to maximizing what you have and trying to push it all the way to the end, right? Get all those bushels that we can out of there. And I think that's a great spot, right? As we kind of think about, man, we've got a little bit to go in 26. But then also, where does our planning begin for in 27? And I don't want us to completely shift gears, right? But there's a lot of pre-buy options that are starting to come out. Lots of fall fill programs are going to start up in the next 30 days. So, Ben, as you kind of think about that transition point, right? We're still going to keep pushing 26. We still want to capture that value. But, Ben, what are some things as you look forward in 27? What are some things that kind of catch your eye that we can still be planning for?
Yep. So I think I turned my attention to a couple things in particular. I think nitrogen is on the path to maybe not correction, but maybe trending in the right direction, I'll say. So that being said, nitrogen is one thing that I'm the scared of the most to cut. That's the thing that'll keep me up at night if I decide to cut it. So what I need to do is make sure that what I am putting out there, I'm doing everything possible that it's being used. Many ways to be having that accomplished, and not all of them involve adding another product. Right? There's some very simple things we can do to make sure that the unit that we put out there is utilized in the corn plant. So making sure our nitrogen dollars are being spent and used wisely is one thing. Along the same lines, on the same token as our phosphates. I haven't gotten a phosphate price yet this year, but I can probably assure you, you're not going to be pleasantly surprised with the cost. So I want to make sure that the phosphate price that we put out there is also being used. And that one's more of a challenge because we don't usually talk about split applying our phosphates, but we can talk about the phosphates that we put out there at that one time. Make sure it's going to be used in that season.
Man, I think you brought up two key things, right? We know that nitrogen, it's coming down a little bit, but as I've been talking, right, I don't think we're seeing a large reset yet. And like you said, phosphates, I'm afraid they aren't going to adjust. And it all becomes about efficiencies in my mind, right? This year, all of a sudden, it seemed like with the way that the world went, everything became about efficiency. And I think we need to plan for how do we start seeing those efficiencies in 27. And I guess as I think about it, it's not that it's simple, but it's things we want to start thinking about, right? How can we manage our nitrogen to get more efficient, right? To drop that, even if we just talk a tenth of a pound of nitrogen per bushel, right? Those are those efficiencies. And I'm going to go back to where we started. A lot of times in our minds, we think, oh, it's got to be expensive and it has to be complex. I don't think it has to. In fact, I think some of the best efficiencies are simple and cost effective as we look at it. Talk to me about some of the things you've done for efficiency on nitrogen on your place.
Couple things. Again, I said that it doesn't have to be adding something to the tank, and that has to
Yep.
do with moving it closer to the season. We were huge fall applied anhydrous. Then when you start to look at it, that's a really terrible storage site. Now, if we talk about better places across the country, Iowa is probably one of the better places. If you want to try to knife anhydrous in the fall, that's probably the better opportunity to do it. But it's still not the best thing to do for utilizing our nitrogen. So we moved into a spring application, right? Then all of a sudden we started to realize that we should split that up a couple times. I'm not talking rocket science here, guys. This is stuff we've known for a long time. A couple things we started to do past that. One, we stopped using what we would call our traditional stabilizer, and we started to shift more into something that would hold nitrate in place. I think that's been huge for us, right? Because we know with that stabilizer, it's doing everything to try to keep it in ammonium, even though everything in the world is acting on it to try to get it convert from an ammonium to a nitrate. That's been one thing that we've done. The second thing that we've done. Is pair it with the humic acid. Humic acid has some really cool benefits when it comes to holding on to a little bit of ammonium. Just try that as well. I'm really excited to see what that one does this year. That was something new for us. But the third thing that I want to try, but I haven't gotten to, and maybe you can shed some light on the exact benefits of this, but is pairing it with a molly of some sort. And I've heard a lot of conversation about running it early or running it with a side dress or running it late. And I'm curious your thoughts on that, John, of what are the best opportunities to do that are.
Man, I love everything you've listed. And then we kind of get to the Molly, right? And first of all, when we think Molly, it is required in such small amounts, right? We're talking hundreds of a pound. But what Molly's doing on our corn, we're putting it with some UAN, right? We're putting it in with that side dress application, is it's part of an enzyme that's called nitrate reductase. Well, we all know that term nitrate, right? NO3 minus, we know nitrate in the soil. Well, when the plant takes that nitrate up, it has to be converted into plant available forms. There's a lot of biochemistry in there. Quite frankly, none of us care, and I'm not sure I could even step you all the way through it. But I can tell you this, Moly is required in that enzyme, nitrate reductase, to convert the nitrogen you just applied into a plant available form so that we can utilize it to form amino acids. We can utilize it to form proteins like chlorophyll. And that's where that Moly comes into play, but it's required in such small amounts, right? It doesn't take very much to move a big needle on that. So I love that, right? As we think about those efficiencies going forward.
And I'm not saying what I've tried is the end all be all, right? We're always changing and adapting. And I travel from the pretty much the Rocky Mountains to the east to the eastern seaboard, and I'm always learning something new. John, I'm curious. I've shared what I'm doing here in central Iowa, but again, I know that not everything I do is correct, right? Again, if we look over here to the right, you'll see where my hog manure applicator didn't quite get to the edge of the field, right? It's not a show farm. It's just, I'm in a real world situation. So what down in
Yep.
Southwest Missouri is working in a real world situation for your nitrogen dollars?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm going to go to side dress and management, right? Things that you kind of brought up, things that we're aware of. We have heavier soils, right? When we come down, a lot of our CECs are mid 20s. We have a lot of clay content. Uh, we can hold some more nitrogen because of that, but it also limits our water availability. And so we are really big on that split application of nitrogen. Let's put it close to when the plant needs it so that we can utilize it. We can maximize that part of it. That's going to be one of our biggest things, right? We've started using some Molly. I'm a huge carbon fan, right? That's a big key topic right now. Huge carbon fan, but also just keeping it there, right? When we're looking at nitrogen prices like they are, we have to try to maintain that placement of nitrogen, right? We can't afford to be losing lots of it. But really, I thought it'd be interesting as we kind of start to wrap that up and as we plan for going forward, to just encourage everyone to try a little bit. You kind of already brought that up, right? Don't be afraid to try. Sometimes they go great. Sometimes it doesn't go so great, right? But the key as we move into 27, I think, is efficiency and being willing to experiment, right? Try something that's going to make sense on your farm. And a lot of it down here with our soils, the way they hold its nutrients is going to be, how can I help to maximize that efficiencies, right? Whether it's phosphates, potassium, such a big thing on those heavy soils. And can I be creative, right, in the way I place them and in the way, or in the kind of the location and the timing.
Yep, I can't disagree with anything you just said. And I think the other thing that's really comfortable about everything that we've just talked about, well, most everything we've just talked about, it's stuff that crop needs: zinc,
Yep.
moly, boron, nitrogen, potassium, phosphates, right? We're not out here talking foreign concepts. We're talking real world proven things that will help this corn plant do more, do better.
Yep. I completely agree with you. Well, Ben, I know that you know this question's probably coming because we've had a chance to visit a lot. But when I get a chance to have a conversation with an agronomist in a different part of the country that's being successful, Ben, if you could narrow it down to one key thing, and I know it's hard, right? It's hard to say one thing, but what's one thing that you changed for 26? Probably maybe going to expand a little bit more going into 27 that you think moves that ROI needle for you?
So the jury is still out. Actually, two things come to mind. One thing that I changed for 25 is I hired a good marketer. With working a full-time job and farming as well, that was one thing that was lacking. It was my marketing abilities. And there's two sides of that equation, right? There's the yield. I can kind of control that, but then the price you get for it. And that one I felt I needed some help on. So I had hired somebody for that, and it's already paying dividends. So that's one thing, nothing agronomy related. But second thing, again, this isn't a new concept. I'm just a little late to try it. We've always been good at side dressing, right? Somewhere around that anywhere V3 to V7 or so, V8. We're out there with our Coulter bar side dressing. Well, due to some unforeseen circumstances, I was forced into trying some Y drop this year. But actually, I'm super excited to see how that does, because when we go back to demand curves, nitrogen is needed the whole season, right? Especially late season. So I got that crop up to a good start. It wasn't showing any nitrogen deficiencies. So I hired some Y drops to come in, not on this field, but just south here. And we're going to see what some late season 32% application with sulfur as well can do for this corn plant. It might be better, it might be worse. I don't know, but I'm excited to see what it does.
Man, I think that's awesome, right? Some things that make sense, make agronomic sense, make financial sense, and hopefully going into 27, give us a great ROI on those crops. Well, Ben, I hope that you have the best of your week. I know you got some travel. I'm not going to lie, it's already about 100 degrees down here, a little over that with the heat index. I'm going to go find some shade and get ready for tomorrow. So, Ben, have a great week.
Thanks, John. We'll be seeing you.